What an extraordinary ceremony postcard by the wonderful Guchingara Yunupingu. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today. For those of you on site at the National Gallery, please download Slido, SLIDO.com, and type in NVAEC, NVAEC, and you will be able to download the Q&A feature. And if you're having any problems, please feel free to ask any of our friendly staff in the theatre and they'll be able to help you access it. It now is my great pleasure and delight to introduce our next presentation from the National Gallery of Australia's First Nations lead arts educator, the extraordinary Krystal Hurst. Krystal is a Worimi woman from Taree and Foster of New South Wales, mid-North Coast, with ties to the Biripi and Garangai peoples. Alongside her work at the gallery, Krystal is the lead artist and creative director of Gillawarra Arts and has exhibited her work in Canberra, Sydney and Darwin. Krystal Hurst and our other First Nations educators at the gallery have developed the Arts Ways learning principles to support teaching and learning experiences that focus on teaching through the expression of culture. These principles prioritise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ways of knowing, being and our doing, focusing on how we teach as well as how we, what we teach. Krystal, thank you so much for being here today. Krystal is a graduate of the National Gallery of Australia's Indigenous Arts Leadership Program and an extraordinary, unique person. And I now open up the presentation to you. Take us away, Krystal.
Oh, thanks so much, Ian. Well, hello, everyone. Good yugu, that's how we say hello in my language. And it's really lovely to be here with you all and to just give a bit of an insight into what we've been doing here at the National Gallery for First Nations learning and through our programs as well. I would also like to thank Auntie Mary for your lovely welcome to Ngunnawal country. You always make us feel at peace and always at home, so thank you so much. I can't see the PowerPoint. Can't see what I'm looking at. Oh, there we go. All right. So I'd like to say an acknowledgement of country in my language. So Kujiku, Nira Wubalin, Nira Yiku, Marala, Badaku, Yik, Badaba, Ngunnawal, Nambri, Badai, Gatai. And Nambri country, and let's all walk together on this pathway. And it always was and always will be Ngunnawal and Nambri lands. And so what I'd really love to talk to you all about today is about our program, what we've been doing over the past year and a half, and just tell a little bit about our story and what we've been doing with lots of students, with staff, and really enriching the learning programs here for many visitors at the National Gallery. And I'd like to audio describe myself. So I've got curly hair and a bit of tan skin as well. I also have a little bit of a bright smile. They always see me smiling up. And I'm also wearing beautiful mariner shells from Butcherwitcher in Tasmania. And I also have a black t-shirt on that says, I love Bayanese Nunu, which I was at one of the festivals out in Brewarrina recently on Nambra country. So, so doing art ways, doing education, doing it our way. And that's really what the program is all about. And it's really about doing things how we do it, seeing things through our perspectives and where we come from, and also how we do things. And that's really that's really how the program's really centered around around our Indigenous knowledge systems and how we do things, particularly in the learning space as well. And so we've been working on this program for about a year and a half, and lots of people have played a really important role in developing this program as well, and particularly thinking about how we approach First Nations learning, whether it's here on site at the gallery or whether we do that online in the digital space as well. But throughout the talk today, I'd like to go a little bit in depth into the Artways approach and how we put that into practice, how we do that online and on site, and also touch on a little bit of Indigenous knowledge systems and our philosophies, which I think is really pivotal and really critical in how we do things here. And yeah, just give a bit of an insight into one of our pilot programs that we ran in late 2020 as well. So Artways of Learning, it's a national program and it aims to promote, celebrate and enrich learning about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art and artists here in the National Gallery's art collection. Artways' strength is that it's centred on Indigenous perspectives, seeing and doing things our way, where we create spaces that cultivate collective learning and enrich visitor experiences throughout the gallery, or in the digital space as well, where we're reaching audiences from various cultural backgrounds, ages and abilities, and from people who really have a hunger to learn more about many of our cultures and histories. And most importantly, what's really important about this program is when we have Indigenous students visit the gallery, it's really important for our Indigenous youth to also see themselves reflected in a space like the National Gallery. Through the program, we aim to convey that First Nations art is not just dots, but really demonstrate that there is a plethora of diverse practices, artists, languages, different mediums and stories that come from this place and our relationship to country and our communities. The Artways of Learning program is constantly changing and evolving, and often we're responding to changes in ideas, perspectives and practices, whether it's changes to art on the walls, to creating experiences for different audiences that visit us. And so we really do have to adapt and learn along the way as well. And from working on developing this program over the last year and a half, I really have to acknowledge those who have contributed in various ways, such as Shane Nelson, who was a previous staff here at the National Gallery, along with Anna Carrick, and also conversations with Emily McDaniel and the amazing First Nations staff here at the gallery, and also staff from the ACT Education, who all have really played an important part in shaping the first iteration of this program. And when we were coming together to really think about what this program would look like and how we would deliver it, how we would approach it, all of these questions that we had, one of the questions we did have was, how do we engage meaningfully with First Nations culture through arts? And which really, what brought together that was drawing on our knowledge systems, but also really drawing from the artists and listening to the artists and what they were saying about their experiences, responding to our history, whether it's political movements, so many things that really shape, you know, our collective story. And and thinking about that question, how do we meaningfully engage? One of the things I was thinking about when I first came to the gallery was, you know, how do we approach this? How do we approach First Nations learning? How do we engage students with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art? And so we were thinking about this and we thought, well, we need to put together, you know, our approach, how our mob would do it. And so we put together the Artways of Learning principles. And so you can see here in the middle, it's centered on Indigenous ways of knowing. So how our mob know the world, how we be in this world. but also how we do things in this world as well. And that's really the centre of what we do, what we're really aiming to do as well. And so what's connected to that is really, it's really important for us to create those memorable experiences for students who come to the gallery. What will be that really important moment when they're here or online? How can they really remember those experiences? And also tied to that is really, really important that we talk about our mob as a living culture as well, but also linking the past and the present and have that future thinking as well. So really putting that emphasis and focus on our people as a living culture that's dynamic and always changing. And also really elevating First Nations arts diversity. So we know we have art, you know, that a lot of our mob are creating all across the country, and it's so diverse, using a whole range of different mediums and different stories as well. So really putting, shining a light on how diverse arts practices is. And then the other one is really centering artists' voices. So we hear this a lot in the work that we do, and it's still really a really important process, and really bringing forth the artist's voice in everything that we do, and kind of lending a voice to what they're saying about their artworks and their stories. And the last one is encouraging deep listening and thinking. And I thought that this was a really important aspect to include into the program, which is really based on, you know, what we do in our daily lives. You know, we're constantly thinking and listening to each other. And there's so much that we can learn from each other as well. But going a little bit deeper, I think is really, really important. And so this is what our Indigenous art learning approach is at the moment. And it might also change as we change as well. And the Art Ways of Learning principles is really strongly connected to the Australian curriculum, cross-curriculum priority for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures. And so we really draw on this conceptual framework as well. So really focusing on mob, the people, who they are, where they come from, what's their language group, and placing that in situating mob, you know, to their country and place. What's the story of that place? And also our culture, many of our cultures, and our living identities and living communities. So our principles is really strongly related to this conceptual framework, and it's really embedded in what we do as well. So now I'd like to go through the Artways principles just a little bit deeper. So I really hope that there's a lot that you can also take away to implement into your practice as well. So how do we create memorable experiences? How do we do that? And so we really want to create memorable experiences for visitors through Indigenous learning processes. So how we be in this world, how we do things, and how we see things from our perspective. And one of those key points is learning through culture and not just about culture. So I think that's a really, really important process that we have adopted, which also speaks to the 8 ways of learning, which you might be familiar with as well. And we really use this process, this key framework, to encourage audiences to really immerse themselves into the gallery spaces and really immerse themselves into how we see the world. And we also put an emphasis on how we teach, but as well as what we're teaching. So thinking about those cultural processes, whether it's listening, whether we go outside, connecting to the local landscape, and also through the art as well and through our workshops, but really focusing on what we teach as well, which is really, really important. And we really try to encourage students to support their learning as well, to centre themselves, to reflect on, you know, who they are, where they come from, and how they see the world as well. but how they can see the world through an Indigenous lens. So to really engage the senses in many ways, we do that through different engagement techniques. But, you know, when you come to the gallery, we really want students to remember that moment, whether they're looking at a particular artist or artwork, and really take that memory back with them, so they can have that continuous long life learning about who we are and where we come from as well. But we also really want to create and inspire creativity. So through our workshops, where we're doing the doing aspect, so students can go away with this sense of deeper learning, deeper appreciation, and really take that experience home with them and share that with their families as well. So the next principle is centering First Nations voices. I think this is one of the most critical one. And so in all aspects of our program, we really do prioritise the artist's voice, utilising their own words. So we do that whether it's in quote form or extending on what their idea is or what they have said about their art or their experience. Or we can do that. We also do this through storytelling as well. So really drawing on those narratives, which is really, you know, what our mob do. We tell stories, and we've told stories for millennia and since time immemorial. And that's what really has aided in our survival as a people and as a culture. And we also highlight First Nations curator voices as well. So I think it's really important that we give space for our First Nations curators who are working with mob, who are working on amazing projects and exhibitions. So to hear their voices too, and hear about their experience of what they've been doing behind the scenes, I think is really a really great way to, you know, have a bit of an insight into what goes on in developing exhibitions and their stories. And it's really important to kind of broaden those range of perspectives and approaches as well, and, you know, learn what best practice is. And so we really do centre the artist's voice, doing this when we're doing on-site tours, whether there's special events or activities that we're running. And we also do that in teacher professional learning sessions as well. And also, whether we're working with artists, whether we're collaborating on, you know, a teacher professional learning session, or whether we're delivering a digital excursion, we always try to engage artists to be a part of that process as well. So students can hear firsthand from artists and hear firsthand their stories, and have that opportunity to ask questions and to learn and go a bit deeper as well. And by centering the artist's voice, what we're really doing is supporting Indigenous agency and strengthening representation, because it's really, the tide has really changed, I think, for our people, where we're speaking for ourselves now, and we really, really know the importance of that as well. And so I think, you know, when we're representing artists and mob, representing ourselves, where we come from, it's really all about coming together and learning from each other as well. And so the third principle is promoting living cultures of First Nations people. Like I mentioned before, we're a really enriching culture, and we're also a living culture as well. You know, we're not a culture that is stuck in the past, even though the past is really within us. And it's really important to tell people, you know, what our people are doing now. They're being innovative, they're being creative, they're telling their stories. And we come from many cultures from around this country, and we're also very dynamic and diverse in our practices, in our knowledge, and our connection to country. And so when we deliver our programs, we really try to avoid broad statements by being specific to where the artist's country is, what their language group or clan group is, and really be specific about what their practice is about as well. And we do this by making connections between the past and the present and the future. And like I said before,
we really do try to engage artists, practicing artists, to be a part of the programs, whether they're co-delivering or doing a workshop, to build those relationships, which I think really excites a lot of the students when they can hear firsthand from an artist. And the next principle is elevating First Nations arts diversity. So we know that our art isn't just dots, but they have really important, significant stories. But it's also to shine a light on how diverse many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artists and their practice is, and how that's always constantly changing, how dynamic it is, how diverse it is, but also how distinct it is to their story and where they come from. And we really try to convey that to our audiences, that there's a whole array of different artistic and cultural perspectives and expressions, but doing this by centering the artists and really focusing on the artists and where they come from, what their country is, to really explore their practice a little bit more deeper and hear more about their stories. So what we also have in mind with this principle is ensuring that we have, gender representation. For example, if we're going on a tour, making sure that we choose artists of different genders, have that representation, but also having, focusing on different artists and their mediums as well. So exposing students to whether it's a sculpture or weaving, whether it's a painting or something completely different, to really kind of demonstrate how diverse our expressions are. And the last one is about encouraging deep listening and thinking, which is really strongly connected to our ways of doing things. So we really try to encourage audiences and students to think and listen a little bit more deeply, to spark curiosity by making connections between the artists' ideas or the different concepts, but also for students, really encouraging them to bring their experiences into those learning spaces as well, because in those spaces we can really hear from students about, their kind of experiences. And so we can kind of really draw on that to kind of really give that stronger, sharing happening in those moments. But also to strengthen individual and group learning from each other, and that's how we do things. And really support story sharing, which is really about that. But also really thinking and doing things a bit more critically to strengthen our knowledge and understanding of the many different artists, where they come from and their artworks. And something that we've really wanting to focus on is incorporating truth-telling into our programs. And I think this is a really critical aspect to what we do. And just to be a little bit more bolder in, telling the true history and the true representations of who we are and where we come from. Hearing our stories from our experiences and perspectives, I think is really important, because I think when we adopt this, this process of truth-telling, I think it would really change our country and change the future direction of where we're going. And also hear more about, whether it's about the experiences of, stolen generation, where we can see that through a lot of the artworks on the walls here, whether it's the frontier wars, things that we don't really tend to talk about. But art is a way for us to talk about these things, which is really powerful. And just to kind of summarise what the Artways learning approach that we do here at the gallery, what that's about. So we really want to create safe learning environments here at the gallery, create those spaces where students feel really comfortable to express themselves as well, and to really encourage that appreciation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander arts by making those connections to themselves, to the communities that they come from, but also connecting to artists and their communities and where they come from as well. But also really encouraging deep listening and reflection into, into our programs, and really encouraging and facilitating those conversations, which we do in a really dynamic way. And by doing this, we're building relationships, we're building knowledge and creating safe spaces for our youth. So Artways is really, we focus on how we teach as well as what we teach, and really centre and prioritise and elevate Indigenous artists' voices into all aspects of what we do. And also making those connections and promote living cultures, and to let people know that we're not a stagnant culture, we're really dynamic and diverse and express ourselves in really interesting and artistic ways. And also steering away from stereotypical representations of our mob. I didn't really mention or go into this a little bit deeper before, but it's something that we all know about, and really getting the language right I think is really important, and looking to how our mob represent ourselves, what language do they use. And I think that's, really, really important in all aspects of what we do. But yeah, also developing, relationships with artists, with networks, and with various communities that we work with. But Artways is really about learning from sharing our stories and sharing our ideas and our experiences, but really hearing from the artists and what those experiences are. And about deep listening. So I'll talk a little bit more about deep listening a little bit later as well. But yeah, also truth telling, which I kind of talked about before. And I think art is really a really interesting way for us to really facilitate and educate students about the true history and about our experiences of colonisation or through the medical system and things like that. So we really do try and bring those aspects into the programs with students. And so here I just wanted to kind of reflect on Indigenous philosophies. And, when we think about philosophy, we kind of automatically think of ancient Greece, or perhaps maybe ancient Egypt as well. But here in Australia, in our country, we have philosophies as well. We have knowledge systems. And particularly drawing from and learning from those knowledge systems, there's so much that we can really learn and really appreciate from those systems as well. So one I just wanted to talk about is the concept of chukulpa. And with a lot of the artworks that we have here at the gallery really do speak to this and are really expressed by the artists from their experiences as well. But for chukulpa, from this cultural philosophy, this belief system comes from Central Australia, from a whole range of Aboriginal language groups. But really, chukulpa describes a time when ancestral beings travelled along the landscape, breathing life into existence. And during this sacred era, the ancestors instilled a variety of moral codes and laws to give instructions of how to live in this world. And these included artistic expressions. And we also know that artists come from a history where that's been interrupted by colonisation as well. So there's those stories and those experiences that we should be listening to as well. But for Anangu people, life really revolves around chukulpa, the cultural underpinnings of their society, of life and rebirth, and it's vital in their beliefs. With chukulpa, stories are passed down from generation to generation, and these stories, dances and songs underpin all Anangu belief systems in society. And we know that elders pass these stories on to younger generations where deemed appropriate, and Anangu must share their oral history to keep and to ensure the continuation of their culture for many generations to come. So to really understand First Nations arts and culture, it's really important for us to understand Indigenous wisdom that really underpins a lot of these artistic expressions and the ways that we look at the world. And I wanted to share one philosophy from my mob. This philosophy was told to me by my Auntie Vicky, so I really like to acknowledge her for sharing this. So Naranga Barangang, it means listen to me, and it means that the person, for our people, it's about having the right to speak, and it's about having the authority to speak of the matters at hand. So it's talking about our right to speak on issues and matters that concern us. But Naranga Barangang also means deep listening. So it means listening with your mukas, which is your ears, listening with your minyangs, your eyes, and also your yukul, which is your heart. So listening from your ears and your eyes and your heart. So that's really how we kind of, you know, move throughout the world, is we're always listening, we're always encouraged to listen. And it's just a really important philosophy that, you know, that we carry with us wherever we go. And that really comes through the work that I do as well. And so I thought that I can kind of demonstrate the art ways of learning principles in practice. So I'll kind of talk about it like how we would deliver it, whether it's on the floor or online, just to give you a bit of a sense of how we utilize the principles in practice, to give you a bit more of an insight. And so, for example, we would show an image of an artwork by one of the artists here at the gallery. So here we have Betty Muffler, and this artwork is called Nankri Nura, which means healing country. And we'd really just introduce the artists and talk about where they come from. So Betty, she comes from Pitjantjatjara country in Central Australia. And then we would ask students to take a moment to have a look and observe what they can see in the painting. And then we would ask how they would describe Muffler's artwork. So what words would they use to describe this artwork? And we get all sorts of answers, and we kind of build on those answers as well. And, you know, I think what's really important is when it comes to culture and knowledge, it isn't always something that's shared or given. You kind of have to earn that knowledge in a way. So this is a way that students can kind of earn to learn and listen as well. Because, you know, learning about these things, it's a privilege, and it's really, really important. And there's Betty there in front of her artwork, beautiful lady. And yeah, just really encourage the students to, yeah, describe and look and see what they can see in the artwork. And then would you bring in the artist's voice? So Betty says, when I'm painting, I'm touching the canvas and I'm feeling good energy. It's connecting with my spirit, and all of these feelings become part of my painting. And so really bringing Betty's voice into that space so the students can hear directly from her words. And then we would expand a little bit more now on what the painting is about, what she's speaking about, and to go a little bit more deeper. And in those moments, we would just facilitate those conversations and go a little bit more deeper. And here's another quote by Betty Muffler, where she says, through my paintings, you can see my Nankri work, watching over people and also looking after country, my country. This place is very important. We all need to look after each other and respect our home. So really, yeah, it's really important and really lovely that we can hear directly from Betty Muffler and bring that through what we do at the gallery. And then what we do is kind of expand on that, expand on the ideas and what the students have kind of talked about. And we go a little bit deeper, so we can ask the students a question or a provocation, to really get that engagement with the students. And a way that we can bring in that truth-telling aspect is talk a little bit about the history of what Betty's family has been through, to bring that truth-telling aspect into that space. And a lot of the times the students have no idea of what happened out there on her country in the 1950s. And so that's kind of how we kind of do the Outways learning approach. So really encouraging those spaces of learning with each other, listening, and really having a good yarn with each other as well. And so now I'd like to talk a little bit about the pilot program that we ran in November 2020. And so we did this with ACT primary and secondary students, and we partnered with ACT Indigenous Education, who have been really amazing. And I really, really love those guys so much. And they've done such amazing work with us, and we've had such a good relationship. And so I just wanted to kind of give you a picture of what we did in that program. So we had students from local ACT schools, we had First Nations students in primary and secondary. So we had our arts educators on the floor, taking the students throughout the gallery, applying the Artways approach. But we also had Kelly Cole here, who's one of the First Nations curators, to bring the curator's voice as well. So the students had an opportunity to ask questions and hear directly from Kelly. And then after the tour or experience aspect, would go into one of our spaces to do an art workshop. So here, this one of the programs that we ran was talking about the art of protest. So looking at political movements and what our mob have done in the past and doing today, to whether it's fighting for country or water or things like that. And so we encourage students to design a poster that they can express themselves and what they see going on in their local communities. And so how we arranged this this activity was asking students to think of a word that was really powerful and meaningful to them, but then thinking of another word to describe that. And that would be their word to put on the poster, where they can get creative, take photos of themselves and really just, you know, be really creative, doing a bit of collaging. And the students really love this. Another program we ran was looking at First Nations weaving, a lot by from a lot of First Nations women from all around the country. So looking at different weaving practices and those beautiful sculptural works. And then we'll go outside on this beautiful sunny day. It was just such a lovely space. Everyone just really talked about how calm they felt and how much they felt like it healed themselves personally. So it was a really immersive experience to really participate in that space, to learn a little bit about weaving practices, but also in this space, you know, there was lots of yarning going on, lots of laughter, and it was just really about bringing people together to learn about this. So it was really awesome. And this was one of the feedback that we had from one of the teachers, and they said, I think it was awesome to have the kids in this space. Only one of our students had ever been in the gallery previously, and they were excited to be there. Letting the kids view the watercolour paintings, referencing Albert Napajira's work that we looked at, and understand the importance of country, and then go outside and have the chance to paint the land was awesome. So it was really great to hear how that experience was for them, and it really shaped the program and what it looks like now. And then this is the image of when we sat outside, connecting to the local landscape here on the Ngunnawal country, where the students kind of drawed on Albert Napajira's watercolour practice, and the students had a chance to create their own landscape painting. And some students even thought about a place that they were connected to, where they were from. as well. So it was really great to see a lot of those expressions and really expressing themselves as well. And we also, running out of time, but we also had lots of teacher professional learning sessions with ACT school teachers. And so that was a really great experience as well. And the teachers just really raved about how much they just really want to do more. So we'll probably be doing more workshops with them soon. So yeah, if you really like to, you know, take part in this program, you can book an excursion with us. You could do this online or on site as well. But also I really encourage you to utilise the Artways principles as a guide into your practice and what you do as well. And really engage with the community in which you live to collaborate on various programs and things like that with your community. And we also have a whole range of learning resources on our website that you can get into your classrooms and really excite your students as well. So thank you so much. And yeah, Maringu, thank you so much.
Thank you, Krystal. I'm hearing words like together. I'm hearing words connection, listening, truth-telling. I'm hearing identity, land, curiosity, heart, ears, eyes. That curiosity. What is fundamental to the Artways learning that you're exploring is you're taking them back to constant experience and having them explore what experience means to them as an individual in relationship to other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that is so beautiful about the work you're doing, Krystal, because it is so important that for our youth, we encourage that identity.
Absolutely. So important.
And it's fundamental. And it's Hetty Perkins was talking about that earlier today, you know, so what amazing work. So thank you.
Thank you.
And of course, that is all going back to how do we know ourselves? How are we being? How are we doing? Knowing, being and doing is fundamental to the Artways 5 principles, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely right.
And what wonderful principles they are. How fortunate we are to have Krystal Hurst here at the National Gallery. And I've got 1 or 2 questions, but before I do, yes, Indigenous, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander cultures, our First Nations peoples are now part of the national curriculum. So this is a critical resource for our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters and our allies and our communities to engage with arts ways, experiential ways of learning and experiencing and how we interact and have our relationship with art. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So you've actually answered some of the questions. Are you too quick? Which is, one of the questions are, does the program have any resources online? Well, you've noted that. So where can they find that online?
You can find it on our website, just go nga.gov.au. But also it's important to note that we have received funding for the Artways program where we can develop more resources and collaborate with more arts workers and artists. So that's in the works.
And of course, you're making arts central to the experience of how people are exploring. That's wonderful. And another question is, yes, it would be wonderful if there was online opportunities to connect this program. Would you like to explore that briefly, Krystal?
Yeah, so you can book a digital excursion with us where we can deliver Artways to your classroom, and we do that on Zoom. So yeah, just get in touch, look on our website, look to see where those contact details are, and yeah, you can book yourself in.
Marvelous. And one last question is, thank you for your insightful presentation. And would you be able to recommend any resources that help to encourage deep listening in young students? And you've already explored this, but would you like to explore it further?
Yeah, I think it's something that's not really out there a lot. It's out there with our community, it's out there with our mob. But one that I tend to lean on is by Judy Atkinson, where she's worked with a lovely lady from Northern Australia, which talks about Dadiri. Which is really about deep listening and contemplation. And that's something that we've incorporated into our programs, but also with my mob, with our cultural philosophy, bringing that into this space as well, which is Naranga Barangang, which is about listening, deep listening as a process. So we can do that in various ways. We can do that outside when we're doing a workshop and we're connecting to that local landscape, really reflecting and knowing the landscape and whose mob and country that we're on. And it's really about doing things a little bit slowly. We tend to do things so fast, and it's just really about slowing down and taking those moments just to take your time in the gallery spaces and really reflect and listen to what the artist is saying, and also ask questions as well. So
that curiosity, and both in the two philosophies you've noted with the Bichinjara and with the Dakin.
Chukulpa?
Yeah, no, of course, but the one that Auntie just referenced.
Naranga Barangang.
Yes, it's about taking that slow, taking that time to experience things.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Krystal.
Thank you.
Well, that was very, very inspiring. And thank you, Krystal. And we now move on to the next session. But I just want to encourage all of you, people on site at the National Gallery, will have the opportunity to explore and to learn about the Artways learning process and principles over today and tomorrow. So I hope that you have the opportunity to be there with Krystal and Arnie Mary Atkinson, who's the National Visual Arts Education Conference Elder, will also be in attendance today with you, so that they get to meet Arnie and have fun with you.
Yeah, looking forward.
And what I loved about your presentation is that you provided experiential ways and you showed case studies on how you're doing it and different ways of doing it.